Hello and welcome to the Dose of Benny podcast. Look, to be honest, I don't really know what this podcast actually is, what it looks like, what it feels like, what it's going to grow into. This just comes from a growing need for me to express myself in a long form format. I don't really vibe with the fast flowing nature of things like Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts, TikTok, all that sort of stuff. Not that I don't see the point of it, but just to convey a message the way that I love to convey messages, which is with depth and authenticity. YouTube and a podcast, is the way that I consume content. So I figure I might as well start producing the same here. So if you're here, thank you for being here. And I hope that you relate to a lot of the things that I'm about to present to you. So I guess, who am I? Well, I'm Benny Matthews. I'm a strength conditioning coach. I come from a background in traditional strength conditioning in rugby league, believe it or not, and then spent a number of years coaching in rugby league circles. And then that co-evolved with growing my own PT business on the side after I graduated from university with a exercise and movement science degree. And it sort of just morphed this perfect obsession of strength and performance, but then being able to sort of sprinkle what I was taking from the performance world and bringing it into Gen Pop with my everyday clients. And then alongside that, I coached, powerlifting athletes. Inevitably, a lot of my footy players that I was coaching would come and do off seasons with me and stuff like that. And then how do we get to ultra running? Well, like most people, I think during COVID, it gave us a lot of pause. And it wasn't necessarily something that we were ever anticipating, yet it was thrust upon us, and my business was completely shut down. So in Queensland, I was not allowed to practice as a coach anymore. And the only thing we were really allowed to do at the time was go out and run. You were allowed to go outdoors. I can't remember the exact time, but we figured if you went out in the bush, you're going to be hard pressed getting pulled up by the cops if you're out there for longer than an hour. I think the rough rule from memory was like 60 minutes. And I just went to a local trailhead. I'm based in Brisbane here in Australia, and went down to the local at Enoggera Reservoir and jumped on a trail for the first time. Despite growing up in the area, I'd never been on the trail itself, and went up South Boundary Road, which is now a regular run for me. And it nearly killed me just doing a 4K out and back. I didn't have any sort of endurance running background at that point, neither from a coaching perspective, and it just hooked me in a way that provided that endurance, but the same type of intensity. And I was listening to a lot of podcasts at the time from, like David Goggins and Cameron Haynes, who are, I think are pioneers at bringing a lot of people into the sport of ultra running. And I very much tapped into that, and the psychology that came with ultra running was very, very appealing to me, and continues to be right up until this point now. And I guess that's where my love and obsession for ultra running ultimately grew. And it didn't happen right away. It came from wanting to solve something and understanding that the mindset and the willingness to suffer under your own volition, I guess is the way to describe it, is something that attracted me to ultra running. And then, how do I get to ultra running from a 4K run though? I think it was just stupidity mixed with curiosity, to be fair. I just thought more seemed better. So I guess naively, I thought, well, the longer you go, generally the slower you go, therefore I'm not fast. So if I can just tough it out, it doesn't matter if I'm not fast right now. So I don't know if that relates to you at all about the way that you go or found ultra running. Maybe it's not. We more than likely came from very different backgrounds. But yeah, it's led me up into this point. And I'm happy to share more about my story in podcasts to come, no doubt. But I guess to sort of fast forward 6 years, I've done multiple 50Ks, 100Ks, backyard ultras. I've done 100 miler, and I'm now 3 weeks out, or just less than, I'm 19 days out from my first official 100 miler at Cape to Cape. So I'm flying over to Western Australia, to the Margaret River region, to race there. I've never actually been there, even as a tourist. I've got a lot of family in Western Australia, so I'll meet some of them while I'm over there. I'm going to take the family, so my wife and my 2 kids, we're all going over. My wife will crew for me along with my uncle. And yeah, I actually just this morning finished my last sort of intense session. So I guess to sort of speak about a bit of my training theory and how I've come into the sport and stuff like that and how that's evolved. I finished a incline treadmill session this morning. So uphill treadmill threshold sessions have been something that have evolved for me over the last, I guess, 6 to 7 months. I've actually, to be completely transparent, been experimenting with a whole heap of training theory from David and Megan Roach in the States. So if you don't know who those 2 wonderful people are, I highly recommend you go check their podcast out, the SWAT podcast. If you're listening to this, I highly doubt you haven't listened to them, because they are much more of an authority in the ultra running space than what I am. And it's just been fun as a coach to, listen to these guys who have lived the sport for so long, pioneering, but then also just being creative themselves. And I very much vibe with that. I've always been known as a bit of a jack of all trades, and never really knew where to place myself in like a coaching niche, as much as I hate that term. Because I was performance driven working with my rugby league team. I wanted the best for those individuals, but then I enjoyed, Gen Pop being able to really favor, recovery variables, because they are quote unquote just everyday people. Whereas you have to be very stringent as an athlete with where you're applying certain variables, and just seeing what they could produce with those limitations, and what an individual who was just an everyday person could then leverage from their given circumstances, and how their goals differed. And it just never stopped me from wanting to learn from different disciplines. I've put my hand into so many different training baskets over the years, and there's not one modality that I've dabbled in where I haven't taken something to apply it into my own greater coaching ethos. So I guess where I differ completely from like traditional running coaches is that I am going to have a massive strength component, because I still think there is not a person on earth who is too strong for anything. So there is always just this fun element of like, how much strength training can you continue to get away with, I guess is the term, with your endurance running, with your ultra running prep. And how does that change your training principles if you do favor strength? And that's something that I've definitely been able to leverage, is my strength background heading into trail ultras, having that resilience to like eccentric stress. So running down hills, and then just that repeated bout of running up hills, and just that constant change and undulating terrain. I just found created this whole heap of resilience despite not having a lifelong background in running and this high training volume or anything like that. And getting an understanding for the physiology and how to adapt that to traditional running methods has been really fun. And I feel like I'm only just starting to scrape the surface of how I'm putting that all together. And now that I am growing my clientele away from rugby league centric, from Gen Pop, where it's lifting and strength focused, and really starting to conjure my own running community, mainly in the online space now, as far as coaching clients are concerned. And, anywhere from say a half marathon up into a 100K and backyard ultras and stuff like that, really starting to tweak my own variables, and seeing great results. So to sort of steer back to my conversation around my training, I just finished that uphill treadmills session. So it was an 8 by 5 minute workout with 60 seconds recovery at threshold. So for me, that was up just over 170 beats a minute. So you're in the hurt locker there. You definitely get that sort of lactate headache start to ring in the back of your head. And I've just found the treadmill has been such a good way to cram intensity into my training. without having to eat into recovery so much. So whilst, carrying a physique that is not a stereotypical endurance runner's physique, I sit up around 87 kilos, which is not a massive guy when you look at, the world that I come from of rugby league and powerlifting and even just dabbling around other coaches who work in bodybuilding. But I sort of am stuck in this gray zone of, too light to be, significant in powerlifting or strength considerations, and quite heavy to be super economical to be an elite runner. But it has allowed me to continue to pursue my passions in both fields. And then it's morphed this weird longevity aspect into things as well, where it's like, well, I've now got so much of an aerobic bucket or ceiling that I'm yet to push up against because I haven't spent a lot of my life there. And now that I'm sort of entering my mid-30s, I'm on this slow decline for strength and hypertrophy anyway. So I really feel like I've nailed things from a tissue gaining perspective, and then being able to try and maintain that without the intensity of, say, road marathoning that is really going to require me to drop a substantial amount of weight to chase times if that's what I was after. Whereas I can now enter ultra running and I don't have to fall into this stereotypical box of what I should look like or how I should perform. And there's just this added element of being out in nature and sharing with a community that wants to go on and share this specific story that's related to this specific course, because it's not just 42.2 kilometer road marathon. And yes, granted, course profiles are slightly different in road marathoning, and you get to travel the world and all the world majors and all that, and that they come with their own communities, and that's great. But I think there's just something so pure about an elevation profile that is unique to that course, and that course records mean something, and that it can play to the strength of an individual, or it adds to the grandiosity of an individual who can go and gain course records on multiple different courses. So for me, it's just being able to create this, I guess, perfect storm of fulfillment that I don't feel like I'm losing out too much on my strength background, but it's actually helped propel me in a world where I could easily feel like I'm less than, or I'm behind, or I need to pile in all this mileage whilst I'm trying to raise a family. It's really, really difficult to try and dedicate the time to endurance sport when you're trying to show up as a father, as a loving husband, to grow an online business, to transition away from this, to nurture friendships, your own family. There's a lot, and it can get really easy to suck yourself into, just do more, do more, do more, do more. That is the way to becoming the best possible runner. And yes, to boil it down to a single derivative, if you do more of something, you will get better at it. But I also think there is a way that can, I guess, create, well, that's the way I'm thinking of it anyway, is longevity in the sport, is I want to enjoy the process as long as I can. If I go and potentially implement something that I think is the most optimal, it might work and get the immediate result, but what does that look like at scale? And that's something I'm very cognizant of. And it's why I've constantly sort of pulled back from my running at times and leaned more heavily back into the lifting, just to sort of get those juices flowing, because I still love both of those worlds. And I know to a certain degree they still complement one another, but it just keeps the momentum ticking over and keeps my love and enjoyment. It's like, I forgot this part of lifting and what that feels like, and feeling progress in this space again. Or maybe I want to finesse a specific movement that I think could have some carryover. And it's just this big dance, this big play, and it all stems back to curiosity. And that is what my training ethos boils down to, is I'm just a curious guy. I love human physiology, I love mindset, human will, and all of these intricacies that ultra running provide, and now that the space is really opening up to say like multi-day events, what goes beyond the physiology now that matters most? I think we're seeing these 200 milers, Cocodona 250 last week. If you didn't see, Rachel Entrichkin winner overall as a female. It's like, okay, so what does she possess that has allowed her to break every stereotype that's out there? Like, she beat all the men and she set an all-time course record. So like, I really think that ultra running and these multi-day events, they're now pioneering like a whole new avenue of human performance that lies outside of physiology as well. And that excites me. So whilst I'm in this, 100-mile mindset right now, it's like, I would say it constantly asks the question of, am I playing it small? And it sounds funny, I guess, to the average person. It would be like, how could you ever think running 100 miles is playing it small? But I guess for me, like maybe my biggest setback, or maybe I am playing it too safe because I'm not actually pushing the threshold of what my body is capable of from a performance metric when running 100 miles. Complete versus compete are two very separate things, right, when it comes to ultra running. Because you can walk a lot, you will walk a lot, you will hike a lot. My first 100 miler, it was almost a 50-50 split. There was about 6,000 meters elevation in the 160 Ks that I ran. And yeah, I completed it in just under 26 hours. And I think there was something like, it might've been just a little bit more heavily weighted by an hour or two to running versus walking. But, you can sign up for a 50K. And like, I didn't sign up for a 50K. I just figured like, well, there's a national park, I can just accumulate 50K and I'll get my wife to come pick me up. And the majority of it was built around a one-day hike. Yes, my life circumstances were very different back then. I didn't have kids, and I didn't mind spending a whole day of my weekend because I still spent plenty of time with my wife. We walked our dogs every single day, and she was happy for me to go out and spend that time. And it sort of built that up to just like an 8 or 9 hour hike, I think it was. And then it's like, okay, well, I'm just going to sprinkle some jogging of the flats and descents onto that, and we'll do a 50K. And I did that within a 17-week period of that 4K run to a 50K. So you can go about these completion tasks, and that's what I love, is that is encouraged in the sport. It's not like, oh, you can't do this, therefore fuck off. Like, anyone. And I love that there's more and more, really generous cutoff times to give these people the opportunity to experience what it is to endure something like that. Endure it, like to just embrace that suffering. I don't give a fuck what you say. I don't care if you can't run a step of a 50K. If you can hike 50K and you came from a background where movement was so intimidating to you and you just committed to this one thing for like 4 months and you're like, yeah, I'm just gonna stick it out. Who cannot get around that? And the fact that ultra running is a sport that conveys that type of acceptance, I think is phenomenal. And I definitely want to draw more and more people into the sport and really get away from the fear that hills mean it's hard. Well, no, just think a road marathon is so intense because it is flat. Therefore, your ability to run, that threshold is lower because there is no elevation. So you're going to be able to run or jog more frequently than you could if you were on a trail. So the intensity is there, but that's what can really start to twist people from an injury risk perspective if they aren't actually putting the work in, and then they just go and churn out all these miles in a road marathon and wind up getting hurt because we're running on pavement. You haven't done the adequate strength backgrounds to get that tissue ready for all that impact. Whereas a great way to offset impact is to walk an incline. It's why incline treadmill walking is an effective tool that bodybuilders use all the time, for their zone 2 cardio. I could honestly ramble on for hours about all this sort of stuff. But I guess, yeah, I just wanted to like lay this initial platform out there. I hope that you can convey my enthusiasm that has grown in this sport. But yeah, expect more from me in this space. I'll share a bit more about what's going on in my 100-mile build, how that race pans out. I guess to give a bit of context before I wrap things up, because I'm guessing that the majority of you won't have heard of the Cape to Cape. It's only in its second year. So in that Margaret River region, the literal Cape to Cape track is 120 kilometers. It's usually about a 5 to 7 day hike that most people go on. And they've incorporated obviously the extra distance to make it a 100-mile event. And every year they alternate, so it's point to point. And each year they alternate running it either from north to south or south to north. And this year I'll be running south to north. And I guess the thing that is intimidating me most, which under some advice from a friend that I made, Katie Lovis, has the FKT for the Cape to Cape track. She's a Margaret River local who was living over here in Brizzy, and we met at the local trail store here at Trailco in Barton. And yeah, it was just such a fortuitous meeting. I was actually signed up for the Guzzler 100K, and she was handing out the bibs, and she's like, "Oh, what other races have you got on?" And I said, "I've got the Cape to Cape." And she's like, "Oh, I've got the FKT for that." And so we obviously became fast friends, and I started picking her brains about everything that the race had to offer. And yeah, the most intimidating part for me is the amount of beach running. I think there's almost about a quarter, maybe a little more than a quarter of the race will be on sand, like directly on the beach, I mean. A lot of the single track is sand over trail, so there's going to be sand on pretty much all of it, but specific beach running. And Katie said to me, honestly, if you haven't been there before, the sand is pretty much like snow. There's nothing on the East Coast that is remotely like it. It's so unique to the beaches of Western Australia. So yeah, I haven't bothered doing any sand running. Obviously the stress, as anyone would know, literally just walking on the beach when you haven't been frequenting the beach very often, a lot more stress through your feet, through your calves, Achilles, all that sort of thing. So calf strengthening has been a big focus of my strength training blocks. But otherwise, yeah, it really could just be anything. I haven't given it too much thought from a training implementation perspective. It's more about how I'm going to show up psychologically, emotionally, and mentally to the process. And that's just acceptance that I can't control any of it. All I got to do is get on here, put one foot after the other, and for as long as I can, the thing that I am most pleased about running south to north is that I'll be doing those beach sections in the day. So at least I can look to my left and just say, what a beautiful place that I'm running, and just try and lean into that gratitude as best I can, and know that it's going to be done within a few hours. And the fact that my longest training run is now behind me. I did that on the weekend, which was a little over 4 hours. So I chalked up about 35 kilometers there in the local trails here in like Inogra Res, up Nebo Break and all that sort of stuff. So a lot of the trails that you'll be familiar with in the Guzzler, if you are a Brizzy local. And there was a lot more vert. So I compressed a lot of vert in there to really try and get a lot of eccentric stimulus and stress through my legs as that one last big bout 3 weeks before the finish of the race, the beginning of the race, I should say. And I definitely got that out there. So I can't really offer up my body much more from a pre-fatigue state or a stimulus to, I guess, offset fatigue. So that fatigue resistance that I'm after. And I just got to, just show up for those sandy sections and just constantly take in the sights that are going to be there. And the fact that I've never been there, I'm going from my first 100 miler where I'd run every single meter of trail on that course I created, so 250-mile loops. I actually created the course. I won't go into the story today, but essentially a race that I was meant to make as my debut 100 miler got cancelled 2 weeks out from the start of the race. And I remember my wife calling me, and I didn't skip a beat. I just said, well, I guess we're just going to have to come up with our own course and do it ourselves. And she just laughed, and she's like, I knew you were going to say fucking something stupid like that. So that was my first 100 mile adventure, was all self-manned with like a heap of mates that were helping me and family, friends. My wife crewed me and stuff, and she actually paced me for a good number. She ended up running her first ever marathon on a trail. She is an absolute savage. The more you listen to this podcast, the more you will hear about how amazing my wife is and the inspiration that she is to me, coming from her powerlifting background and the mindset that I continually use as motivation and modeling, taken from her competitive time as a powerlifter, and put that into my own training. And, you know, taking that there from the comfortable nature of the local 100 miler, and now I'm going all the way on the other side of the country, and I won't have run one single meter. So I'm just giving myself some time and just understanding that that is going to eat into the clock and my performance, just not knowing where I am, not being 100% certain on when to turn here, when to go there, running at night, not being comfortable with certain things. And then also the field itself is only 150 runners, and I'm not sure if they've even filled those spots. And then there's 150 50-miler competitors that will start at the halfway point of time for us. So they start at 6 p.m, we start at 6 a.m. So yeah, we are at the pointy end now where a lot of those, everything physical is behind me, and now it's about managing the emotional drain that starts to build up, and what is that taper anxiety that a lot of people talk about, because you're so used, especially someone who's process oriented like I am. I just love being in it. When I'm in it, like that's me. I'm seeing, how did I respond to this? How does that affect what I do next? And then when most of that stimulus is done and we're at a point where we're not really going to get any fitter, we're not going to get any less fit. It's all about just recovering and then trusting in that, you know, that repeated bout effect, and then that overcompensation theory. And then we're just ready to launch, and then hopefully you get it all right. You know, you've got a flight over the other side of the country. So I've never flown to a race before, and then we've got to drive commute as well. So there's a lot of other things that will be going on in the background that I'm telling myself I'm chill about now, but until you're living it, you just don't know how you respond. So that's everything that I'm contesting with at the moment. Anyway, if you've made it this far, thank you so much for checking out the Dose of Benny podcast. If there's any particular questions that you have around, you know, your own training queries, like I said, I'm a passionate coach first, and I want this, you know, to be a platform where I give back to you, the listener, as much as I can. So any questions that you have, please don't hesitate to put them in the comments. You know, if you've caught a reel, you know, a little short of this, put it in there, like email me at doseofbenny.com, whatever. There's so many ways that you can get at me. And I definitely want to help you, you know, achieve all of your running goals and try and piece together maybe some of those gaps in your knowledge and application. But otherwise, I hope that you find some of the things that I share relatable and somewhat motivational, I suppose. So have a great week, and I'll catch you at the next one.